The rich and powerful want us to think the economy is a line on a stock market ticker. That's wrong. The economy is powered by us. It's what we create, what we buy, what we need. President Biden has proposed bold public investments in jobs and families, but more is needed. We need housing, healthcare, caregiving, action on the climate crisis, and millions of good-paying jobs. This is our moment to finally unlock prosperity for all of us. For more information, go to prosperus.org. That's prosperus.org.
News Talk 850 WFTL presents Joyce Kaufman, No Restraint. Here's Joyce Kaufman.
I was having an interesting conversation with a friend the other day, and I thought this is something I want to share with my listeners because I'm sure that it happens to you as well. There's probably not too much that's out of the realm of possibility anymore in my mind. I've seen the craziest things that I would have called, quote, conspiracy theories, end quote, years ago, come to pass. And I've also grown to understand that there are things that are going on in government, whether it's our own government or world government, that are inexplicable unless you believe that there are people pulling strings that we don't elect and that we may never even know their names. But we were talking about all kinds of conspiracy theories and what it is that attracts people to any given theory. And we went from Area 51, and by the way, we now have the former DNI official saying that there were too many unexplainable things having to do with UFOs that need to be examined more carefully. And I hear this even from pretty rational people like Tucker Carlson. What are they hiding? Certainly, I was a big fan of the X Factor, the series, and I was it even called the X Factor? I don't remember, but anyway, it had to do with outer space and all the rest of it. We were talking about Bigfoot sightings this weekend as well, like Loch Ness monsters, and how do these stories or these urban tales get started, and why is it that people begin to believe them? And then, of course, we came to the ones that seem more relevant these days. That's QAnon and the people that are considered fanatics and go on these websites and absorb information about pedophilia and pizza parlors that is really just beyond me. And we talked about the deep state. And I remember when I refused to say the word deep state, and I thought this is just, a way of assigning blame to people who you never know. And who you can't prove have any power or did anything. And yet I have grown to understand in the last couple of years that there are people entrenched in the bureaucracies in our government that you can quite ably refer to as a deep state. And where do we get all these ideas? Well, it used to be you had to see a special on television or you had to read an article or a book about them. And now you have social media and you have these websites that claim to be fact-based news, and you're not really sure whether or not they are fact-based, but you read them because they're interesting and they have some incredible writers. Some experts think that conspiracy theories flourish whenever there's like social unrest and political unrest. And one could say that there's a Department of Justice official who's now saying that he believes they can prosecute some people for sedition over the January 6th storming of the Capitol, which, by the way, was not an armed insurrection since they didn't find arms, and since an insurrection has to be a person with power trying to take over the government. And that's not, those people who showed up dressed like Vikings didn't have any power. Their claims that the election was stolen were just that, hollow claims, things that deserved attention, but certainly they weren't insurrectionists. I talked to a psychologist just this morning who says that why conspiracy theories flourish is that people are looking for some sort of controllable world, and that conspiracy theories actually flourish when social machinery breaks down. And it's a kind of a way of helping you make sense of a world that you have no explanations for. Political science professor Erica Oliver, who studies conspiracy theories, says that there's a deeper divide than you can simply, assign labels to, like right-wing or leftist or progressive or conservative or socialist or rationalist, all of these terms that we use. The rational part of our mind grasps things when they're presented in a clear, fact-based, logical way. But the intuitive part of our brain functions in that very murky, kind of dark, unconscious well of our souls. And that's what creates anxiety about the uncertainty of the world. And it gives us this desire, it triggers this impulse to find answers as fast as we can so that we can get to some degree of certainty. COVID-19 has intensified that. People are saying that conspiracy theories being linked with politics really is examining how politicians tap into the sentiments of people and communicate the message. I know you feel this way. Let you understand that I am reminded daily how you feel, and then let me connect to the important things that are happening so that I can get your vote or I can get your approval for this policy. The conspiratorial impulse, of course, leads to all of these theories, especially in COVID-19, ranging from the virus is a hoax, to the virus escaped from a virology lab in Wuhan, to the virus was actually a bioengineered weapon to destroy the world. Conspiracy theories thrive in misinformation, and certainly this pandemic has really made us all doubt that the experts know anything at all. And now part of mainstream political discourse is when our leaders actually weaponize whatever theory they want to run with for partisan benefit. And they don't have any neutral sources that they turn to where they could get information which might sway their opinions. So look, experts differ on what causes a conspiracy theory, but it is definitely something that we can define. And it's a plot conceived secretly by a powerful group of people with sinister goals and something to gain by deceiving the best interests of the public. And if you replace conspiracy theory with fake news and journalism morphs into enemy of the people, well, then guess what? That's pretty damning, if you would agree with me, no matter what side of the aisle you sit on. They impeached President Trump for inciting an insurrection. And there was plenty of social media chatter before January 6th saying that the Capitol would be stormed because of whatever misinformation was out there, some of it on the left and some of it on the right. In fact, if there are politicians who believe the conspiracy theories, then how do you impart knowledge to a public which has way less resources and probably far less reputable gathering agencies? Even if you take a look at the president's speech on January 6th, and even if you're one of these people who believes it was full of conspiracy theories and that it was, a lot of it was half-truths or untruths, the fact that he articulated what so many people are feeling, that the media is a big problem, that the idea that the fake news can sway an election or that tech oligarchs can compromise the ability of people to get their message out in elections, leads people to believe the president when he said in that speech that the fake news kept you from understanding that he had won the election and actually won it by a landslide. Now, I don't know that he won it by a landslide, but I am not convinced that he lost it fairly. And the idea that you would have people storming the Capitol building on the basis of a speech that Donald Trump had delivered numerous times in the past, whether it was about election fraud or it was about any other conspiracy that most people who supported Donald Trump fully believe. I believe that the media is biased. I believe that they feed us propaganda and news that's simply untrue, and that they hide the truth from us to get an ends that they want, which is basically a left-leaning government, which it's a nanny state. It takes care of people. It buys people's votes. I believe that. I don't think that's a conspiracy theory. I think it's been established. You had a federal judge just the other day come out and say, the media is responsible for this. The media has been duplicitous with the viewers and listeners of the news, and we don't know what to believe anymore. We don't believe any of it for the most part. And so when we finally had a champion who stood up and said, they're lying to you, make them tell you the truth, we were all for it. What we didn't understand was that you can't make them tell you the truth. They have the same First Amendment rights that we have. As a matter of fact, theirs are enshrined. The freedom of the press, freedom of speech is part of freedom of the press, but theirs is segregated, and they have been afforded wide latitude when it comes to how they disseminate information. First of all, how they gather information. Where are the investigative journalists of today? You got a handful out there, and and I would say that Project Veritas and James O'Keefe, they're trying to get stories that nobody wants to cover in the so-called mainstream media. I saw an article just the other day where James O'Keefe went down to the border. He was chased away, as have been ABC and CNN and MSNBC and Fox and every other major cable news or general network news station reporter and photojournalist from the AP on. They've all been banned from covering the story of what's happening at the southern border. So how does that, not set off a mistrust of government in the people? And even more importantly, a questioning of why the media doesn't insist that they be given access to this. I assure you that if Donald Trump was still president, there would have been many, many cable news networks, demanding access to see where the immigrants who are streaming across the border, particularly the children, are being housed. And instead, we're still talking about something that happened on January 6th, which resulted in really far fewer deaths than all of the rioting and looting and craziness that went on this summer in Portland, in Seattle, in New York, in Chicago, in all of these cities. We weren't allowed to pay any attention to that because it just didn't fit the narrative of Donald Trump bad, anything else good. So there are a lot of things right now that the media can blame itself for. And one of them is this inability to self-examine or to become somewhat, at least circumspect about what it is that the public's perception is of their journalism. Because I don't know that you can even call it journalism anymore. We have Governor Cuomo of New York now primarily getting a pass for behavior that attempted to sink a nominee for the Supreme Court not that long ago. We're watching interviews a couple of months ago of his brother and him, CNN's Chris Cuomo and Governor Andrew Cuomo, where they're, yucking it up. And the people in New York are watching their aging relatives in nursing homes being sent to their deaths by that very governor. But they're joking about oversized Q-tips and big noses. And I'm sitting there thinking, how could they expect me to take anything they say seriously when they've made a mockery of their profession and they've made a mockery of leadership? And so, if you want to know why you've seen an erosion of our values, it's because part of what we see in these news shows, which are not news shows anymore, is we see impulsivity, we see self-centeredness, we see anchors who want to be celebrities, we see affirmation over information and belief over fact and all kinds of distractions and incivility. And those are the character traits that they used to say were Donald Trump's. And yet those psychological profiles could apply to Don Lemon. But we're not allowed to talk about that. Well, particularly about Don Lemon. Because if we do talk about him and we do say that he is a narcissistic personality and seems incapable of rational thought, then guess what? We're racist. And that's how they have reduced the discussion and ended any possibility of discussing these things one person to the next, because they label anyone who doesn't agree with them as racist, Islamophobic, misogynistic. You come up with the term right-wing, extremist. Who wants to hear themselves or their political views described as right-wing extremism based on white supremacy? I can't tell you how sick I am of hearing about my white privilege. It's enough already. I don't have any white privilege. If I did, I'd give it to you. I don't want it. Nobody has ever shown me any evidence of white privilege in my life. Nothing and nowhere that I've been have I gotten a free pass. I've had to scrape and work as hard as I could to get anywhere in my life. Nobody gave me any privilege. As a matter of fact, I've had to do with watching other people get opportunities that I was denied because their physical characteristics were different than mine, or their gender was different than mine. And I never sat back and said, well, this is a big conspiracy against me. I said, this is the way life is. And you either find a way to overcome the obstacles in your path, or you become victim to them. And I'm not a victim. You know, this idea that we're going to, everybody gets a prize and we're going to have one group of people that are oppressors and one group of people that are the oppressed, and that this is going to make us a more reasonable country is absolute insane. That's a conspiracy theory, in my opinion. Conspiracy theories have less to do with breakdowns in social machinery and more to do with weaponizing things. We have polarized Americans today because you can Google and get information that is directed at you specifically because of your beliefs, because of your affinity. And you can stay on the screen or you can stay on a website longer if they give you what you want. And they figured this out. That's what algorithms are all about. For those of you who think they're just some sort of beyond your understanding technological term, let me explain something to you. Algorithms measure the amount of time and certainly the amount of perseverance that a person will apply to a particular search. So if you're a person who every single day logs on and visits certain websites that cater to particular political views, there's an algorithm that gets triggered or tripped, which now fits you into a little box as far as Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or Twitter or whatever, Parler for that matter, where they now can capture you and feed content to you that they know you're interested in and that they know you will stick with. Because if you stick with that information, the way they generate revenue is by keeping you at a site long enough to view enough ads which should fit into their profile of who you are to make some purchases. That's how they sell, and that's how they make their livings. And they make pretty handsome livings when you think about it. When I was just, addicted at the beginning of COVID to Amazon and began to see how no matter what I searched for, within the next couple of weeks, I would be presented with multiple opportunities to purchase items that I had looked at online. Whether or not I had purchased them was irrelevant. How much time had been spent in the pursuit of, well, let's just say health food, in pursuit of workout clothing or sweatpants or loungewear. As soon as those algorithms were tripped, the media platforms, the social media platforms began to hammer me with information that they knew I was interested in the hopes that they could sell me stuff. And it was very effective. I can tell you now, this is not just, pie in the sky. Amazon knows how to present things to me just on their opening page, which will encourage me to spend money on the site. And it's absolutely astounding how quickly that takes place. I can search for something at 10 o'clock in the morning, and by 10:15, there will be a dozen opportunities for me to look at something either exactly like what I searched for or in the same ballpark, so that their assumption based on the algorithm is that I'm in the mood, or I'm in the market for a particular item. And that's amazing to me. Artificial intelligence is something that's hard to wrap my mind about it. But I can tell you this, it's not supposed to be journalism. Marketing is not supposed to be journalism. And what I see in journalism these days is the same thing. There's an algorithm that they've established that tells them what kind of news you want to see, and then fuels your desire for news that bolsters your opinion or tries to eliminate news that bolsters your opinion so that you lose that interest. And that's the most amazing part for me. Journalism isn't dead, but it's on life support. Social media is what dominates our political lives, our civic lives, our family debates. It gives us quick answers and snap judgments based on what we already think and how we already feel. We move from the age of information to the age of distraction, and now the age of conspiracy. The critical thinking is at stake with fewer news outlets informing the public. Social media creates trivia, denigrating scientific models and replacing them with wishful thinking. And that's on both sides. For the Dr. Fauci's and the Joe Biden's and Kamala Harris's, President Biden and Vice President Harris, to tell me that if I wear a mask or two masks, even after I've been vaccinated, when I'm with other people who have been vaccinated, I'm actually doing the right thing, is crazy. There's no science to back that up, as Dr. Rand Paul pointed out to Dr. Fauci in a congressional hearing. And if that's true, then why vaccinate people? And if it's true, then that masks are actually capable of stopping the spread of the virus, then why did we even come up with vaccines? And why are we now insisting that people take the vaccines? Now, I've been vaccinated, so I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I wasn't vaccinated because I live in constant fear that I'm going to come down with COVID or give COVID to my loved ones. I was vaccinated so that my daughter would let me visit my grandchildren. It's that simple. I didn't believe, and I still don't believe, that the vaccine was the mark of the beast, or that the vaccine was going to, make me sick and set off some response in my body that would eventually kill me. I never believed that. I thought the vaccine is probably got a 95% efficacy rating, which means that it will probably prevent me from contracting COVID-19, or at least the variant that we're used to seeing in this country, although, of course, there will be other variants, as Dr. Fauci continuously points out, and I won't be protected necessarily from them, much like they still tell me to go get a flu shot every year. And when you get a flu shot, they then tell you when you catch the flu, well, this is a different flu, and the flu mutates, and there's all these variants. And so I stopped getting flu shots, and I'll probably stop getting COVID-19 shots when we finally settle into the understanding that there may be variants and no vaccine is going to be completely effective. And when we come to grips with the fact that nobody wants to walk around in a mask for the next 2 or 3 years. I know that Dr. Fauci and Joe Biden said I should want to do that, but I don't want to do that. And it's getting worse and worse every year, the messages that are being fed to us, and it really came to a head with COVID-19. The pandemic has literally increased by 1 hour each day the time that the average U.S. adult spends on his screen time. Screen time in 2020 averaged 7 hours and 50 minutes. Think about that. If you're awake for 14 hours a day, let's say you're awake for 18 hours a day, okay, because you don't sleep more than 6 hours like me, well, then guess what? You half your time is spent looking at a screen. And it's expected to top 8 hours by the end of 2022. So if you look at that, Americans perceive inaccurate news to be intentional, either because the reporter is misrepresenting the facts or making them up entirely. That's what we believe. Whether or not that's true is irrelevant if that's what we believe. A report from the RAND Corporation reinforces that notion, saying that between 1989 and 2017, U.S.-based journalism has gradually shifted away from objective news and offers more opinion-based content that appeals to emotion and relies heavily on argumentation and advocacy. And you can see that in the cable news channels and both sides of the aisle. There's way more liberal stuff, but it's obvious that journalism, once it expanded to a 24-hour cable news cycle, and you had all this on demand with internet outlets, there's not enough reporters to produce facts. Or at least to be verifiable facts around the clock and around the globe. So instead, we go to the internet and we go to to websites that are like web sleuths for quick answers to complex questions. In 2005, there were 50 million blogs. Now, that sounds like a lot to me, right? I remember 2005, and I remember the bloggers that showed up at events where there were normally radio rows, and now there was a radio row and a bloggers row. And I remember thinking, wow, 50 million bloggers, that's crazy, 50 million blogs. Well, now there are 512 million, okay? And 77% of online users, that means 3 out of every 4 people, slightly more than 3 out of every 4 people, reads the blogs. According to the Pew Research Center, 86% of adults in America get their news from digital devices. 68% get their news from TV. 16% get their news from radio. Thank you, all 16% of you. And 32% from print. Pew also reported that U.S. newspapers alone have lost half of their newsroom employees between 2008 and 2019, with an overall editorial employment across platforms dropping by 23%, from 114,000 to 88,000. And the pandemic just magnified that to such an extent that regularly, newsroom layoffs, furloughs and closures are being blamed on the coronavirus, but it's way more than that. If they don't want to provide explanation and analysis in news coverage, if they don't want to make clearer distinctions between content types so that they clearly label news as distinct from opinion or analysis, if they won't explain the purpose of the opinion, content, and editorials, and if they won't identify new opportunities for your opinion sections, including adding diverse community views, guess what? Then they will continue to lose credibility. And in the short term, media outlets really need to hire more reporters, more producers, more editors, and rely less on opinion and analysis. There's plenty of that on radio, on TV, on blogs. Journalism, rather than psychology or sociology or political science, is uniquely qualified as a way of combating conspiracy theories because its primary mission is to enlighten the public. So it makes for intelligent decisions in the voting booth. So in the long term, high schools and colleges and universities really should require media and technology literacy, and journalism should be a required general education course so that future generations understand what it is that journalists are supposed to do. Because as reporters cease covering, if they ever cease covering every gloat, every tweet, and use that time to build a larger coalition that focuses their efforts on rebuilding local newsrooms and a more egalitarian and informed public, but you can't do that with fewer reporters. And you cannot, for sure, do that with biased reporters who are related to our politicians. Journalism cannot survive without the regulation of social media. And that's the debate that's happening now in Australia and Canada and other places. And it's high time. It's going to have to happen here. Democracy is at stake. And let's hope that there's some, resurrection of journalism. Of course, when the Biden administration doesn't allow reporters and photojournalists down to the border, you can see that nothing has changed for the better with this new administration. And I strongly believe that nothing will change for the better. So you've got to be more discerning about what you read, what you watch, what you listen to, and more importantly, what you believe.